Good day, everybody. Carl Bredell, Dr. Bredell here again with another episode of prosperity and health prosperity. Something that I've become quite passionate about. I often see patients sit across me and I think by myself, but this was completely preventable. This was unnecessary. Actually, almost all of what I see is preventable and unnecessary. And that's why I sit and I talk to you. I want to give you information. I want to give you understanding. I want to give you tools to look after yourself. I need more time off work so I can go mountain biking. Please, get healthy. No, I'm joking. Anyway, last week we had a very interesting discussion about chewing and teeth and dentistry and development of our facial bones and space in the mouth because of decent chewing and eating rough and tough stuff, so that the muscles in the face can work, so that we can open up the space, so there's enough space for our teeth. And I don't want to go down that route again. I did that last week. But the week before, we talked about the digestive system in general, and last week about the mouth. So this week, I want to go a little bit further and talk further down the gastrointestinal tract. Talk about the esophagus and the stomach. And the stomach is something that very few people talk about. Esophagus people talk about because heartburn is quite a big problem, but they don't talk about the stomach. And it's something that I feel is so important in digestive health, and because digestive health is important in general health, it is something that I want to spend a whole episode on. So one of the most common problems in modern life is reflux. I want to make something very clear. Reflux and heartburn is not too much acid in the stomach. Please listen to me. This is a lesson I learned from my second year physiology lecturer, professor. He said it's never too much stomach acid. There's a very, very, very small chance of it being too much. And I've never seen that condition, Zollinger-Ellison syndrome, where you have too much stomach in the acid. Never seen it. Heard about it, learned about it 40 years ago at varsity. But most of the heartburn, all the heartburn, is stomach in the wrong place. Not stomach, acid in the wrong place. So you need acid in your stomach. You do not want acid in your esophagus. So what happens, how does it get there? You swallow food, it slides down the esophagus pushes it down with peristalsis, rhythmic peristalsis into the stomach. And then there's a sphincter, a muscle that clamps and closes off the esophagus from the stomach. If you then have relaxation of this stomach, this sphincter, the esophageal gastric sphincter, if that relaxes and there's still food and acid in the stomach and the stomach contracts, it can push acid back into the esophagus, and then you have heartburn. It is completely preventable. I know there are conditions where you have a reflux, where you have a sphincter that doesn't function properly. To my amazement, I've had guys with sphincters where when they change the food that they eat, that eventually this starts working again effectively. Lots of causes of reflux. The first thing is when you are overweight and you've got a big stomach and there's lots of pressure, increased pressure on your stomach, on your gastrointestinal system in the abdominal cavity. When there's more pressure, it pushes on the stomach and you can have reflux. So instead of taking antacids, lose the weight around the stomach. The second thing is just wearing too tight, when your clothes are too tight. So really tight-fitting clothes. Relax, chill a bit, loosen your belt, loosen your button, and don't lean forward on a full stomach. Thirdly, don't bend when you've had a meal and you've got a full stomach. Don't go and do gardening where you bend forward and you push on your stomach. You will have reflux. Don't go to bed when you've had a big meal and go and lie down on a full stomach. That full stomach will cause reflux easier. It's as simple as that. It's just common sense, small little things. But the most common cause is where you have digested food in the stomach plus undigested food in the stomach. And the stomach says, I want to get rid of this undigested food, and it starts contracting. And the sphincter, the muscle, the muscle that prevents the stomach from emptying, that is the muscle that's around the exit of the stomach into the small intestine, the pyloric sphincter. When that decides not to relax and the stomach decides to contract, so now you have the outflow is blocked, the stomach starts to contract because there's digested food. This sphincter decides, I'm not going to relax because there's some digested food, but there's some undigested food. I'm not going to open up. Stays closed, the stomach contracts. What does it do? It pushes stuff back into the esophagus. So now you have reflux. How do you prevent that? Go back to last week's talk, and that talk was on chewing the food. So when you chew the food properly, and by the time it reaches the stomach, there's only fluid. So when you take it to food and you chew it enough so that fluid enters the stomach, then digestion can happen much, much quicker. And what happens in the stomach, in the stomach area? Chemical digestion. So we had mechanical digestion in the mouth, where you chew it, mix it with some digestive enzymes. Now we need some chemical digestion. What's chemical digestion? That is where you have acid that works on the food to chemically break down bonds in between pieces of food. So it will eat up sinews, and it will break down meat to release or to increase the available surface for enzymatic digestion, and that will happen in the small intestine. But you want to chemically break down food as much as possible before you pass it on to the small intestine. And for chemical digestion, what do you need? Acid, lots of acid. You need acid in the stomach. We were not born with alkaline stomachs. We were not supposed to walk around with antacids in the stomach, because you then neutralize the acid that's there. Lots of reasons. The first important one is chemical digestion. You want to break down the food so that the enzymes work on it better. So every time you take an antacid, you reduce the effectiveness of the stomach breaking down food and preparing it for further digestion down the small intestine. Every time you need an antacid, it means there's something not working well. Either you're eating too much, or there's too much pressure on the stomach, or you're going to bed on a full stomach, or you're eating food that digests at different or breaks down at different times. So when you gobble down bread and meat, the bread will break down fairly quickly, but the meat will take hours to break down. And that's when the stomach starts contracting and you have reflux. It's as easy as that. Don't have a big meal, then have pudding, then have coffee, and then go and lie down. I've done it. Trust me. It's a recipe for reflux. It's not fun. You wake up in the middle of the night with all this acid down your esophagus. And it can actually be dangerous because some of that acid you can inhale, or even the gas discharge from this acid you can inhale and damage the lung. If you have it repeatedly and it happens very easily, then go and see a surgeon. Let them have a look. There might be a problem with that sphincter. That's something different. There's a place for surgical repair. There is a place for antacids. Long term, not a good idea, in my opinion. I know it's being used left, right, and center all the time. Doesn't make sense to not go for what is physiologically sensible. It's not physiologically sensible to not have acid in the stomach. What do we need acid in the stomach for on top of chemical digestion? We also need it to absorb vitamin B12. Very, very important vitamin that plays a role in lots of detoxification pathways. Very important for the brain, good for the nerves. Something that a lot of people do not get enough of, and it's one of the problems with vegetarians and vegans. They don't get enough vitamin B12, so it's something, if you are vegetarian or vegan, have it tested, get some vitamin B12 shots, or take a supplement of vitamin B12. Very important. So if you don't have enough acid in your stomach, you might have a vitamin B12 deficiency. Secondly, when you eat and you get bacteria that your body shouldn't get in, stomach acid is a very effective way of killing bad bacteria, killing parasites, just sterilizing the food. And interestingly, the good bacteria handles stomach acid quite well, so it gets passed on into the small intestine and the colon where it belongs. So too little acid, you don't digest it chemically well. Too little acid, you don't absorb your B12 well. Too little acid in the stomach, you don't kill the bad bacteria and parasites effectively. Also important for absorption of calcium. Don't absorb your calcium effectively. So it doesn't help to take in calcium supplements or eat food rich in calcium and you then do not absorb it effectively. You don't get that calcium in a ionized form, so that it can absorb. Then the other interesting thing is, if your stomach is full of acid, what happens? That sphincter, that muscle between the esophagus and the stomach, that works better. So here's the stomach full of acid, it will work even better. So sometimes what I do is I give a person an extra acid tablets to take when they eat in order to reduce the chance of reflux. Completely different to what we were taught generally. If you have reflux and you have heartburn, take an antacid. I say no, and it took me a while to realize that, but when you look at the physiology and the anatomy of the stomach and the esophagus, it makes sense to give acid when you eat so that the sphincter between the esophagus and the stomach works better and prevents reflux, prevents acid to reflux back into the esophagus. So I hope I've given you some things to think about. The more I talk about health and the more I talk about optimal health, the more I go back to basics. I go back to what is common sense. And I also go back to the way we lived for thousands of years. We saw last week the people who ate food the way they found it in their area, in the forest in Africa, whether it was Swiss people in the Alps or Maoris in New Zealand. Once you eat what you was supposed to eat directly and as unadulterated as possible, health improves. Those people are strong and fit and muscular. Bones are strong. Their facial bones, their teeth are perfect. Anyway, I'm going to repeat that. The more I look at health and optimal health, the more I go back to basics. What does basic physiology say? What does basic biochemics say? What does basic nutrition look like? So I know 2 episodes ago I went through all the 5 basics of health. Sleep well, sleep regularly, get enough sleep, get clean air in as much as possible, get clean water in, eat clean, unadulterated, organically grown, unsprayed food, and get exercise, get going. So I started this this episode about me lamenting about the fact that I can't get on my bike often enough. I had such a lovely mountain bike ride this morning. We all need some exercise. The moment you exercise, everything just works better. So one of the things we don't need to do when we've had a meal and the stomach is full, don't go and sit down behind the TV and get pressure on the stomach. I haven't directly mentioned this, but I want to mention this. Don't go and eat and go to bed within 3 hours after you've had your meal. So often people eat at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock and go to bed at 11 o'clock, 11:30. There's not enough time to digest that food properly. So you will still have some food in the stomach, so reflux will happen easier. We make a point of eating, let's say 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 6:30 maybe. And then I know there's at least 3 hours before I go to bed. The other benefit is, by the next morning, 6 o'clock, I haven't had anything to eat for 12 hours, which is the minimum that we should give our gastrointestinal system, minimum time that we need to give it to repair, clean up, get rid of everything, and be ready for the next meal. Something I've talked about before, and I want to just talk about it again, is intermittent fasting. We need 12 to 14 to 16 hours of fasting before our next meal. We lived like that for thousands of years. We had a meal as the sun set, went to bed, woke up the next morning, and then started looking for food. We didn't eat immediately. We didn't have fridges and processed food that was available immediately. We then started looking for food. Anyway, so don't go to bed on a full stomach. Give yourself 3 hours before you go to bed, and that alone will reduce the chance of reflux. I'm going to slowly calm down on this acid subject, the stomach, the esophagus and the stomach, and I hope I've given you some things to think about, and I hope I've given you just some common sense when it comes to the stomach and reflux and acid in the stomach. And I'm going to keep on doing that. Next time we're going to talk about the small intestine and what happens there, and some common sense about that. In the meantime, look at what you eat, smell what you're going to have, taste it, chew it properly, give your stomach enough time to chemically break down that before you pass it on into the small intestine, where enzymatic digestion will take place. Don't drink a lot of fluid when you eat. Why? Because you will then dilute your stomach acid, and you will dilute the enzymes that you've got in the stomach to digest food. So about half an hour before a meal, have your water, and then eat your food without a lot of fluid. It's just common sense. Just think about it. When you drink a lot of water while you're eating, you are diluting your stomach acid, and you are diluting all the enzymes that needs to digest the food. Just another thought. So looking forward to giving you some more common sense, practical information next week, so that we can all attain optimal health. I hope your health is prosperous. I hope you have prosperous health. See you next time. Bye.